What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Why We Love PlayStation VR. Sitting across from me this week and every week, it takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends. It's Desra.
Superman is not brave. And sitting across from me is Brian Paul.
I don't know if I believe that or not.
Oh no, it's great. Ever seen the movie Angus?
Maybe.
Yeah. Oh, it's. Anyways,
we'll talk about that on our Little Box episode. And every week on Why We Love PlayStation VR, we dip into the PlayStation VR archive. We take out a game at random, we dust the blow off of it. Man, I can't get that right. And we take a look and see if it's been updated, given any DLC, patches by the developers, and then we let you know if it's worth your time. Choked on my own words. That being said, Desiree, what game did we decide to play this week?
This week we're playing The Wizards.
The Wizards The Wizards Enhanced Edition.
Enhanced Edition.
By Carbon Studio, released March 12th, 2019. Wow, we keep talking about recent games.
I know.
That seems really recent.
You know, this is an updated version, I guess, from the original. Not the original we got, but the original.
For $24.99. That being said, Des, what kind of game is The Wizards Enhanced Edition?
It's really desperately trying to hide the fact that it's a wave shooter, but it's a wave shooter.
Yeah, it's really a wave shooter, and I think we're going to get way more into the genre definitions of wave shooter and what else it's trying to be.
Yeah.
Further along in this episode.
It's a wave shooter wearing a costume.
If you're not familiar with Carbon Studio, the developers of this, they're the ones who made Alice VR, I think is the other big game that they're associated with. Very interesting, but also not a PlayStation VR title, so we're not going to talk about it too much. But they did also make an extended version of the Wizards for some other VR headset, so we'll see if that ever makes it our way. But as far as the Wizards Enhanced Edition goes, man, you play as a wizard.
Yeah, you do, and it's really cool. I mean, you don't have like an inventory, you don't have like a spell book you choose from. You actually cast your spells through physical motions of your arms.
Yeah, that's a good place to start.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the spells you can create.
So there's your basic fireball, and that's basically what you...
Which is like my favorite one because it's the easiest motion you can make.
It is, yeah.
Right? It's like you're in the heat of battle, you're like, flip, got it. Nice and easy.
Yeah, it's also not particularly powerful though.
No.
I mean, it's fast. You can launch a bunch of them, and eventually, all of the spells that you will talk about, you have, multiple tiers that you can unlock and upgrade. And so you can eventually get one that's a little more powerful. But yeah, so you cast it by basically just pulling the trigger button down, which is important to initiate all the spells. You've got to pull the trigger button down first.
Then also important to note that this is the reason it's not DualShock 4 compatible, because it's all gesture-based spellcasting.
Correct.
So what other kind of
we have
spells?
a defensive shield, which is basically the left hand. It's kind of the opposite. So
I always forget that this even exists.
Okay.
Oh man, I'm just teleporting around like trying to avoid attacks and stuff instead of like using a shield like a smart person would.
I pretty much only use it not for the projectiles, like you said, like a smart person would do. I use it for like the little goblin melee guys who get up close.
Nice.
So basically just kind of almost exactly opposite of the fireball. So it's left hand kind of tilted in. There's an ice bow.
One of my favorites.
One of my least favorites.
Well, I don't like the gesture, and I didn't play as much today as I would have liked. Mm-hmm. So when I dropped in, like all the gameplay footage that you'll see will be after we film this, because the stuff I tried to film before we filmed this, bad news bears. Like I got to go back into that tutorial and learn each and every one of these spells again. So how do you do it again?
It's basically start your hands out here, bring them to the inside.
That's all it is?
Yep.
Why did I think there was like some kind of, I don't know, whatever.
Nope, you just kind of bring them in like that.
Awesome. Well, I kept screwing that up big time, and once I felt like I got it down, I feel like they're fairly powerful.
Yeah, no, they're very powerful. My issue isn't with the power. My issue isn't with the difficulty of casting. My issue is with, we have seen how many archery-based games?
1 million.
Yeah, and they seem to all nail the whole, pull and aim. But man, I don't know if it was my tracking setup. No, I know it's not, because I tried it.
Fine.
Yeah, I tried it just here with yours, and and also other games I've played, very recently. Apex Construct.
Nailed it.
No problem with. Yeah. And so you pull back here, and it's just jumping all over the place, and just very difficult to aim and control. So I use that as little as possible. There's lightning.
A very cool thing to do in VR.
Yep. Basically, you kind of pull the triggers, bring your fists together, pull the triggers, and just push forward, and that kind of charges it. And then when you let go of the triggers, it just kind of blasts out lightning bolts until it runs out.
Yeah, this should have been one of my favorites because in Skyrim, like
Right.
I'm not an archer. Like I am not. I don't like to use swords and shields and stuff. My reason for playing Skyrim is because I like to wander the countryside, like shooting lightning and fire out of my hands. And so this is, I think, just as impressive in VR. It makes you feel powerful, and nothing's more powerful than that.
Yeah.
What else do we have?
There's Pyroblast, which is actually one of my go-tos.
Okay.
So you start your hands together, bring them down out like this, and it casts this huge fireball. The farther apart you have your hands, the bigger it gets, and then you just kind of like thrust it forward and let go.
Yeah.
And it does quite a lot of damage.
Yeah, it's kind of big and unwieldy.
Yep.
And moves a little bit slow. So like it's when it hits your target, it's totally worth it.
Yeah, and there's a little splash damage too, and eventually, one of the uploads or upgrades you get is when it hits the ground, it kind of creates a sort of burning area that will eventually explode, which is a nice bonus. It is a little knacky to figure out. Like it took me a while to figure out how to actually throw it because I was like casting it and then trying to throw it like you throw the other fireball. And
It's sort of just like once you make it, you go.
You just
let it go
just
forward.
push in the direction you want to go. And then arcane missiles, which I think and this kind of will go to one of my issues about the game, is the tutorials are there, and I guess they do tell you what you need to know, but they don't really tell you what you need to know.
I'm curious to hear this.
So, like, you cast the arcane missiles is, first of all, as far as the spells goes, probably the most complicated. You have your hands together, you bring them up, and kind of make a semicircle like that. Really hard to do in the heat of battle until you kind of get. It's very easy to accidentally cast the pyroblast instead. But when you do that, it creates this kind of field of these crystals. And then you sort of tap the crystals and they go flying off to your enemies. And the level 1 is very easy to understand. You just kind of bat at those and they go out and seek out and find the enemies, which is great. But eventually you upgrade it and you get these charged crystals. And I was basically just like, oh, okay, so maybe they're more powerful. And I was just kind of waving my hand and letting all the crystals fly. What you want to do actually is hit those red ones first. Yeah. And then you'll see then 2 of the other crystals in your field will change red. And you do that and actually you end up with more powerful. So instead of, taking 3 or 4 hits to kill one of the bad guys, it'll take only one of those. And so if you're a little more judicious about how you do that, you can actually end up clearing a room very quickly, especially with some of the ranged attackers, which are very annoying.
Des played my saved game today and saw how little I'd upgraded my missiles. So this is actually news to me because it was just I had upgraded pretty much I think everything else, maybe not to the max, but quite pretty close.
Yeah.
And then this was just like I was like, oh, this is okay. Like it's definitely it takes too much time to set up and then send out those missiles. So I didn't bother really trying to upgrade this thing. So it's cool to hear that it gets more useful the more you upgrade it.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much like my play is when you get into an area where it loads a bunch of enemies. First thing you do is cast that, and you actually have some time where it just kind of hangs out there. Eventually they'll start disappearing, but once you've upgraded, you've got 2 rings of them, and then you give the game time to load in a bunch of the enemies. Do that, and you wipe out the whole first wave. It's great.
So we didn't miss any spells, did we?
Well, there's one last one that gets introduced later, and that's the ether, the ethereal spheres. Eventually, you come to a level where there's these new enemy types. I think the game calls them ghouls, which none of your other spells can affect. And so you put your hand in this stuff called ether, this kind of blue stuff that's sort of like a bluish flame, crystal-y thing. Your hands get coated with these crystals, and now you can suddenly cast and create these spheres, which will take out those ghouls and also let you kind of, knock out enemy kind of force fields and switches, but they have no effect on your other enemies.
Right.
So in later levels, you do have to make some decisions between, I have to take out these guys with this. Then you actually remove the ether by ripping it off your hands. Now you can cast your regular spells. Oh, but no, there's some more ghouls, so I have to go find some ether. It makes what was a pretty bland combat a little more interesting. Adds another dimension to it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was what were the bad guys in Harry Potter called? The
Dementors?
Yeah.
Yeah.
These look very much inspired from them.
That's kind of the same idea. Yeah.
They're a little bit freaky, especially when one sneaks up behind you. You don't know it's coming.
Yeah, they're pretty quiet.
But before we depart from our talk about this gesture-based spellcasting, what do you think overall of how it's implemented?
It's mostly pretty good. I had an issue eventually, and it's I don't know if it's my tracking issues, if I was moving too fast or if I wasn't casting properly. But there were many times when things get really intense where suddenly like spells weren't working anymore.
Yeah.
And I think maybe I was moving too fast. We had the discussion with Spark where like, at the beginning, everyone's just trying to throw your arm as fast as you can, but you realize there's kind of a certain speed at which if you go faster than that, the game is not very happy. Yeah. And I think that happens with the wizards. Like if you try to really quickly cast something, it just doesn't know what to do. But if you take a little time, it's no problem.
Right. And of course, time is the one thing you don't have in the heat of battle.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I found the exact same thing. I was like, in the tutorials and the training parts and, when you're just wandering through and there's only one enemy on the screen and you're like, let's get creative. How am I going to kill this guy?
Right.
Then you're like, no problem. Cast your thing and then do your thing and everything's fine. But yeah, no, like when there's like 6-7 enemies on the screen and like you're like, oh, I don't know where to go first. It happened. I felt like it was pretty faulty. And again, I don't know if like suddenly the PlayStation is using too much processing power to like handle all these enemies and the projectiles and the attacks, and so then it's not like capturing our motions or gestures properly, or if it's just us being erratic.
Yeah, just being scared humans and fight or flight kicks in and we start flailing.
But I will say about the whole thing. And the Mage's Tale is one of these things that'll go down without Parole history as like something that like we've talked about a lot but never got reviewed. I do prefer this style of spellcasting to the Mage's Tale. The Mage's Tale, you click a button, and then it brings up kind of like this diamond, and you select from the diamond like which spell you want to cast.
Yeah.
And so like you still get the kind of gesture-based thing where you're selecting it and then using it, but this just feels more like, hey, I'm a wizard, and I get to cast spells and then use this magic accordingly. Yeah. So yeah, highly like if you're comparing the two games in terms of this blows it out of the water in my book. But so that's one of the things you can do in the Sanctum, right? You can go over and you can upgrade your spells, upgrade
What's
your
the
magic.
Sanctum, Brian?
Oh, hey, the Sanctum. Is that not how we started this? I totally forgot.
I think we just went right into the spells.
Well, the game starts in the Sanctum.
Yes.
And it's your home away from home. No, it is your home.
Well, it's somebody's home that you just kind of popped into. And it's yours now.
My home. It's nice.
Yeah, it is nice.
Really nice. And it's your home base of operations, and this is where you're gonna like do all of your stage select stuff, and this is where you're gonna like play with fate cards. We'll talk about that in a second. Where you can customize the color of your gloves.
Yeah,
totally random.
And about that, this is one of my other things where it's like it doesn't really explain what it's there for. It's just this nice little reflecting pool and this weird sculpture that are holding these colored balls.
It's like a punch bowl.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing. I didn't think to do what I guess everyone else was naturally doing. Like I was dropping the balls in the water and watching the water change colors. I'm like, oh, it's red, so let's cast a fireball spell. No, I can't cast any spells now. So maybe this is going to unlock later in the game. And what it is just it lets you change the color of your gloves.
Customizable options.
Yep.
Not really. But then you can into again home base of operations. This is where you're checking your leaderboards. And this is where you're just basically doing everything. The main thing you're going to be doing here is the level select screen.
Yes.
And checking to see like what levels you're able to access, and then also playing with fate cards. I think we need to address fate cards.
Fate cards.
Because fate cards would be one of these things that would be like kind of a footnote in our entire review.
Yeah.
If the developers weren't pushing it so hard in all of their previews and all of their trailers and everything, saying tons of replayability with fate cards, and so we need to address the elephant in the room.
Okay.
Which is sort of like fate cards come standard with a lot of different games. They're just not disguised as something so ambiguous.
Yeah, so basically they're findables in each level. Like each level has one, I believe.
So, yeah.
And it unlocks the ability to replay the level with something changed. Like the enemies are 25% slower. And if you do that, you'll actually score less points. Or there's another one that'll make you go through with only basically one hit and you're dead. And, you'll get more points that way. It kind of adds, I guess, a little roguelike sort of experience to it, but not really. Yeah.
They're modifiers. They're modifiers. Like Beat Saber comes standard with modifiers.
Yeah.
Right? And like and no one's going, oh my God, modifiers. It's like they're cool. It's a cool addition for replayability. But man, that's all it is. They make the game harder. They make the game easier. And here is sort of where I think Carbon Studio got a little bit confused as to what kind of game they were making.
Yeah.
Because you go into these levels and you explore and you kill a bunch of enemies, and like within, I don't even want to guess, like 7 to 8 minutes, the level's over. Right. They seem very, very short, especially at first. And in the second it's over, a leaderboard pops up, and you're like, wait a minute, what kind of game is this? Right. And so all the levels seem really, really short. And then you're like, wait, am I playing a wave shooter? This is sort of what we alluded to at the beginning. Are we playing a wave shooter? What are we doing? And then these fate cards come into play, saying, hey, here's a way to boost your score.
Right.
Here's a way to make the game harder, boost your score, go back and keep replaying the same levels over and over to get your name higher up on the leaderboard. And I think that's when I started realizing, like, oh, I just figured out what kind of game I'm playing.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, it was in earlier versions. It's called the Enhanced Edition. In earlier versions of this, it was just a straight wave shooter. You loaded a level, you stood there, and you threw stuff at bad guys. And then they did add to that, to their credit. There's some puzzling elements now. There's more of a story. You get to move around in the levels, but its DNA is still pretty hardcore wave shooter.
Yeah, and I will say, finding the fate cards, like if you treating the fate cards like collectibles.
Yeah,
I was all about that. I was like, oh, here's a reason to do the thing that I wanted to do in this game more than anything else, and that was just explore. Let's walk around. Let's see what's down this hallway. Let's go do this and that or whatever.
About that.
About that.
Well, and yeah, this is a game that it seems to be saying, yes, we want you to explore this world. Yeah. We want you to go everywhere, check out these little corners, but you can't. There's just places where you just can't go. I mean, it's, let's look at the room here and like, oh, I should be able to stand there, right? Nope, can't go there. Or on the flip side, I found myself a couple times into areas like, oh, I don't think I should have been here because half of this isn't rendered right now, and I may actually have to reset this level to get out of here. It turns into, we talked before about your good old-fashioned LucasArts adventure games where you did pixel hunting.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that. It's like, there was one level where I saw there's these, what are they called, fairy gems, or the ruby things you have to find also.
Let's call them that. Fairy gems. I like that.
Yeah, it's something like that. And I saw that, like, oh, there's some way to get around there, but I couldn't see it, so now I'm just kind of like waving the teleportation thing around to say, oh, it's yellow there, I can teleport to that.
Yeah, and we should probably address the other giant elephant in the room, which is this game supports full locomotion. Mostly, right? You can totally hold the move button down and walk around, which results in the strangest like footsteps. Man, these are some loud footsteps. I feel like this wizard is just stomping around the world. It's like tung, 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 tung. I'm like, okay, dude. I'm like, this is dirt. We're walking on dirt. Why are you so loud? Like, and we're wizards. Why can't we float a little bit, man? Like, can't we be like a little light in the loafers? I don't think that's what that term refers to.
No, it isn't.
Damn, getting everything wrong today. But in the game says, full locomotion, whatever, and then they address teleportation as like magic that you can use. It's a
spell. They call it
as a spell.
Break out your teleportation spell.
But that's not what's going on here.
Yeah.
That's not what's going on here. The levels are just designed with teleportation in mind, and at no point does teleportation feel like a spell, like you're magical. Like it doesn't you don't go up in a puff of smoke or anything like that. It feels very much like every other game that uses teleportation. And you can play it like that, just teleporting around.
Sure.
The only difference, of course, is that they don't want you to use teleportation to cheat in battle. And so when you're in a battle situation, every time you teleport within a certain amount of time, your length of teleportation diminishes with every one. So you got to kind of let your teleportation recharge. And that's when it starts feeling like a spell. Right?
Right. Because, you're running out of power and whatnot.
Right.
It does add a neat level to combat, makes it a little more difficult, a little more challenging. But they're really trying to have it both ways, and they're really not serving out. We're always team options.
Absolutely.
Like we want more options, but this was more like, all right, we built this game for teleportation, and we know people are going to yell at us if we don't have full locomotion.
Right.
Locomotion.
I love that song. So now we need to talk about how the content in this game. There's 3 worlds.
Yes.
Each world has 3 to 4 levels each.
Correct.
Now, we've already told you how short these stages are. They're pretty damn short.
Yeah.
So that means this entire game can definitely be tackled very, very quickly.
I would say about 3 hours, and you've pretty much seen everything the game has to do without doing replays.
Right.
Yep.
So you're blasting through these things, and again, if you're playing it as intended, it seems, with the fate cards and going back and like I get what they're going for, right? The point is to play through the game probably properly, slowly upgrading your magic and or your spells and doing all of that. And then once you're done, you're like, oh my God, I'm so much more powerful than I was before.
Yeah.
Let's go back and use these fate cards to make the game more difficult. Now that I've got upgraded spells, I can get higher scores and I can, kick God Cannon off the leaderboard.
Right.
Which, unsuccessful as always.
Yeah.
And I will say that it just seems like they didn't give us enough levels to do that with.
Well, I don't even think it's necessarily that. It's also the levels, like you said, are fairly short, especially once you have learned the level.
Right.
It's pretty quick, and it still sticks with the whole narrative thing. Like it's kind of like, I don't know, be one or the other. Like In Death is I think a perfect example of like,
Perfect.
yeah, there's no story per se. I guess there is in broad strokes, but that's not what you're playing it for.
They're not telling you a story.
Right. You're playing it for, I want to get through this level. I want it to be hard. I want to see and get that feeling, oh, I have to do this again.
Right.
And I just never get that. Like what I get is I just played a little chunk of a story and then I play that same chunk of the story over again.
Yeah.
And then I play the same chunk of the story over again, slightly more difficult. But it doesn't you never get that I have to do this again, just one more time kind of feeling.
Right. Right. No, I definitely feel like the levels are not short enough to be a wave shooter.
Mm-hmm.
And there's too much story to be considered a wave shooter. And there's just too much movement and locomotion and just navigating from one part of the stage to the other for it to be a wave shooter.
But then there's not enough story to be a story-based game.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it kind of goes back to the point I was making earlier that I don't know if Carbon Studio really knew what kind of game they were making.
Yeah.
They said, hey, we have this cool wave shooter. Let's flesh it out and make a full game.
Right.
And then they didn't quite flesh it out enough.
Yeah.
So a great alternative, a great solution would have been to have a modified version of these levels for when you replay them.
Right.
Like, hey, we cut out all the story stuff, we cut out all the narration, and we streamlined the level so that, it's just smaller, more concise, and, a little bit more well-timed with the enemy showing up.
And to be fair, there's an entire game mode we haven't talked about, which I think is trying to address that, and that's the arena.
Yeah, so I think the arena mode actually just kind of doubles down on what we're saying.
Yeah,
because it's saying, so the arena mode, it's basically 3 mini games, and each of the mini games is, each of the mini games is a wave shooter.
Right, and there's like a tower defense, or a gem defense, whatever.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So like they threw in some tower defense elements, but they're saying, hey, this is our game. Minus the story, minus the stuff, but it's like I played each of them one time. And I was like, I don't want to play these again because this isn't the kind of game I'm looking for right now. And having it just like tacked on as the arena mode, just as part in a menu somewhere, it just doesn't say, hey, we are really committed to these modes, and this is something we're really proud of. And I can see why, because they're very bare bones.
And not only that, it is, like you said, it is hard to find. Actually, it's very easy to miss because like you load the level, your profile, I think they call it, and you're in the game. Where's the arena stuff? So actually, remember that screen where you loaded your profile? The third choice there was actually arena mode.
Yeah,
so, weird UI stuff.
Yeah, I missed it quite a few times before I finally did the review. I don't know, man. Is it time to?
I think so. I think we've beaten this so far.
Des, what's our review scale?
Our review scale is 1.
1.
You absolutely have to buy this. This is just the best for the platform. It's got to be in your library. It's a fantastic game. Just go and buy it. 2 is, yeah, sure, why not? If it's a genre you particularly like, or if it's on sale at a decent price, go ahead and pick it up. It's not going to do you any harm. And 3 is no. Friends don't let friends buy crap. We need to vote with our wallets and tell developers that we deserve better. So 1, 2, or 3. What do you think?
This is tough, man. This is really, really tough. I played through the Wizards for review. I played it a little more today. And I will say that despite the fact that we didn't even talk about the bosses, there's a couple bosses, and maybe graphically impressive, I guess, to an extent. The worlds are graphically impressive to an extent. We didn't talk about the voiceover, which is like really well done.
I really thought it was Maurice LaMarche, actually. Okay. For a good like 20% of the game.
Good imitation, at least.
Yeah, I had to stop and I need to look this up. I was like, oh, good on you.
So and like there's just, and for me, like I hate when games try to be funny, and like he has just like kind of like some dry humor thrown in.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, cool. Like I know some people said the voiceover bothered them. I enjoyed it
No, it
thoroughly.
was great. It was well done.
Right. So like there's all of these elements that should combine to make a great game. You know, especially like we spent the first half of this episode talking about the gesture-based spellcasting, which mostly works really good.
Yeah.
Really good. It's real good.
It's good.
Most work really well. I don't know. The problem is, it's just none of these parts really came together to make a seamless game. It seems like they lost their direction. Like they didn't. Again, I said it twice already. They didn't know what kind of game they were making.
Yeah.
And so it's certainly not a 1, but it's not a 3. So it's, in my book, it's a 2, but it's a weak 2. Because the problem is we always say, oh, if it's a genre you enjoy.
Right.
So if you enjoy wave shooters, well, no.
That's
because
true.
this isn't a great wave shooter, you know. And if you like adventure games, well, no, this isn't a great adventure game.
Yeah.
So if you kind of happen to like both of those genres, and you're willing to take a risk on something that's, you know, that didn't live up to expectations, then this is a pretty weak 2. Like hopefully this thing will go on sale for $10 and everybody will try it out.
Yeah.
Because for $10 I'd be like, yeah, why not, man? Like it's cool, and I liked some of the things they were trying, and I liked exploring the worlds and finding those fate cards.
Yeah.
I just didn't actually enjoy using the fate cards very much at all. Like I didn't care about the leaderboards.
Right.
So it's a weak 2. It's tough to recommend to any one person in particular. Yeah, but if it's on sale, you might want to give it a shot just to see what you think of it. That was not a very good rating.
So to me, there's one thing I was thinking of when I first heard about this game, when I was playing this game, and that's Fable: The Journey. Xbox 360 Kinect title.
Game?
Yep.
Yeah.
Which was set in the Fable world. It was beautiful. The story was fantastic, and the UI was garbage. It was so hard to play, you know. And it's such a disappointment because it was our, you know, actually, honestly, one of our last dips into the Fable universe before it all blew up. So I was just thinking, like, why couldn't I have this like control scheme as well implemented with the depth, the storytelling, and the awesome world building of Fable? And that was kind of what I was hoping for, and then it didn't deliver. Right. Now that's probably my expectations, you know, coming into it. I'm going to give it a 2, but I think it's a little better than yours. I actually, as much as I think I tended to be crapping on it a lot during this, I actually enjoyed it. I did. It was good, you know. When you did like get that timing and kind of learn to like slow yourself down, and it did feel kind of badass. Just like, oh, boom, I'm casting my missiles, taking those guys out, throw a couple big bombs that way, and you know, really once you upgrade all the spells, it does feel pretty cool and pretty badass. But yeah, like you said, it doesn't quite, you know, it feels like they had a wave shooter. And they're like, oh, we don't want to be just another wave shooter, so we're going to make ours different. And in doing that, they kind of got away from what it was good at, you know, because and like some of the puzzles are interesting ideas. Like there's an interesting puzzle there, but there's a lot of times where like, oh, is this broken or am I doing it wrong?
Yeah. And
that's always a bad feeling on it, you know. There. You know, a puzzle shouldn't be so easy that you can instantly figure it out, but you should know it's like, no, I'm doing something wrong here, not is this broken. So I'm going to give it a 2. I think $24.99. I think that's too much for it. If it gets on a decent sale, then go ahead and pick it up. But yeah, it's not something you need to drop everything and go buy right now. So.
All right, well, so I guess that does it for another episode of Why We Love PlayStation VR. Obviously, if you played the Wizards Enhanced Edition, let us know what you thought of it. I think this is going to be one of those very divisive games. I think that a lot of people will get into it and go, oh, I feel like a wizard.
Yeah.
And on that level, it succeeds.
It feels great, yeah.
And so I think a lot of people will be more willing to ignore some of its other faults because of that feeling.
Yeah. So
if you're one of those people, or if you happen to agree with us, God willing, please let us know in the comments. Also, what other games do you want us to play? And the list is ridiculously long.
And keeps getting longer.
I basically just hand Des a stack of video games every week and go play these and then tell me which ones you played. Yeah, let us know, though, because we always want to play the games that you want us to play and talk about the games that you want to hear about. Leave that in the comments below.
Yeah.
For another episode of Why We Love PlayStation VR, I'm Brian Paul.
I'm Des.
And we'll see you next week.